Call this meeting of the Zoning and Planning Commission to order. We're going to start today with our regular agenda, and item number 1 is a rezone request. It's to consider a rezone petition from RR to GC for a property described as lots 1 through 6 of Block 1 of the Mayor First subdivision in the northwest quarter of Section 1, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. And at this time, I'd ask the party who's presenting, please feel free to come forward and let us know what you plan to do.
Chairman Abrahamson, the Commission. I'm Sean Sorn with Boundary Engineering. I'm actually here on behalf of Mr. Steve Circle with Tri-State Engineering to help represent this project. It is a rezoning request from rural residential to general commercial. If you look at the map, the land to the south is already general commercial. The land to the east is currently general commercial. You got 25th Avenue on the west side, which is a border between this property and the R1 property to the west. North is a small tract that would remain rural residential that currently has a mobile home court located on it. Currently, I don't believe there are specific plans for the property other than to get it rezoned and then try to get the property marketed as a general commercial property. Anything to add? Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Soren?
The only comment I would have is that I would want to know what they're going to do with 25th.
Excuse me. We're not taking public comments yet, but we'll let you do that when we get to that point. Any comments or questions for Mr. Soren? Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Come on up and
The only comment I have
let us know who you are. And
I'm Randy Ulmer. I own the property. Me and my wife own the property to the north of Trailer Park there,
okay.
the mobile home park. The only problem I see with any of this is that the road, when it was built for regular pickups and cars and stuff. It's not designed for trucks or anything like that. So my concern is what they're going to do with 25th. They're going to improve it and widen it. And there's the drainage just that goes through there. And it's kind of high banked on both sides. There's no protection from vehicles going off into either side of that creek that's there. And then now that they tied 9th Street all the way in, we have a problem on top of the hill there where the traffic coming from 9th into 25th, and there's no traffic sign there, a yield sign or stop sign or anything. And there's been almost a few accidents there. So it's getting congested on 25th. And my concern is what we're going to do with the road, because that road gets beat up pretty good in the springtime just from the garbage truck going up and down it. It's pretty broke up the way it is. So.
Thank you, Mr. Ulmer.
Yep.
This time, if there's anyone else in public who'd like to make comment, please feel free to come forward. Any other comments from the commission? Mr. Josephson, would you like to make comment on this?
Good morning, Planning and Zoning Commissioner Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson Planning. The request, as you have before you, is to rezone from RR to GC. In looking at this, the one issue that staff identified was that the way that the property is currently platted is platted more as a residential subdivision with a cul-de-sac in it instead of one that would support commercial development. So staff is proposing a condition to the rezoning that would, this is on the second page of the staff report next to the recommendation, and the motion would be prior to the issuance of any building permits for structures on site, the developer shall record a replat of the property. The property shall be replatted to standards consistent with commercial development. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Ellis.
Steve, does that mean the streets would have to be changed if they go, if Is that what staff would recommend, that there'd be a redesign of the street issue within that subdivision then?
Precisely, yes. We've had some concerns, especially expressed by our fire department, about the ability to adequately service commercial development, and under the fire code, it would also limit the height of the development within that area. So between those issues and just looking at it and the fact that it was platted to support residential development, we do want to see a replat that would support to commercial standards.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Josephson?
I have another one,
Mr. Alpert.
Chairman. What about water?
According to the water department, this is in the staff report, is that there is a water line and a sewer main that are located along 25th Avenue East. Also conceding that the developer may be responsible for any additional infrastructure improvements that are identified during the subdivision process. So there is service to the site. You know, it may, once they get in there, it may require some upgrades, but that's going to be something that the developer will be responsible for.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Corton?
Mr. Chairman, with respect to 25th, we have a subsequent development later in the agenda, Creekside, and as part of that, both this property and Creekside will have to pay a fair proportionate share for the upgrade for 25th. 25th is planned to be upgraded from a basically a interior access road to a collector road. So we're in the process of figuring out where in our CIP that will be part of and the funding for that, but we will have that as probably part of our second or third year funding for our CIP. So we have that already on the agenda, already looking at the upgraded 25th in order to accommodate these developments, and each of the developers will have to pay a fair proportionate share for the upgraded 25th.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Krieg?
Question for Mr. Corton. Is that just in the immediate area of 25th, or is that all the way down to the old inn?
It'd be 25th from basically from the trailer park going all the way south to the outer loop road.
Mr. Josephson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr.
Chairman.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed rezoning from rural residential to general commercial, subject to the conditions that are listed.
I'll second.
Been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approval. Thank you very much. Item 2, on the regular agenda is a final plat, to consider a final plat for Oliver Commons, generally described as a replat of lots 1 through 7 and 17 through 24 of Block 1 and Lot 1, Block 2 of Dakota Crossing subdivision, situated in the east half of Section 33, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting this final plat, please come forward.
Thank you, Commissioners. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying, representing the owner of Oliver Commons. I guess to start here, I'd like to, we did make some revisions here based on some comments received yesterday, so I'd kind of like to hand out the revised plat that we have.
All right, thank you.
The plat in general has stayed the same. Mostly there were some presentation issues. The main change was probably the addition of a meets and bounds description versus just the replat description that is shown at the title there. In general, the plat here has stayed the same since preliminary plat. I guess I'd be happy to address any questions or concerns this board may have.
Yeah, I have a question. I guess as far as the final plat that you have, early on in the, I think it was in the preliminary plat where you included the traffic study.
Correct.
You had at the intersection, I think it was the intersection of 15th and Elks, you had at the, what was it, the northbound turning movement coming off of Elks, you went from a C to a D, and I was wondering, was there, I know this is just, we're at the final plat, but the roadway width, does that accommodate any kind of, like a 3-lane? Was there a plan in the design of this PUD to accommodate that?
I don't believe there currently is plan for a turning lane. Mr. Hall here did our traffic study. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, or?
There was no improvements for that intersection. So I don't know. I mean, we're in the process of doing the civil plans right now, and so if any comments come back from that, based on comments from the city, we'll address them there.
Commissioner, I can address that. As you said, the traffic study did indicate a level of service that's consistent with no improvements in that particular location. The street width does have the ability to restripe it and restrict parking in an area if we decide that we want to consider additional turn lanes, but that can be handled in the final engineering process.
So like in a traffic study, you'd be really looking at something that was at a F, like a F to warrant any kind of adjustment in that, how the traffic is handled, like adding a turn lane or.
Excuse me. Yes, that's pretty consistent with local roads policy. There's no real written policy that the city has, but it's consistent with good engineering practices that you would look at the level of service E or F if you were going to require the developer to do something. Now, the city is in the process of developing some policies and standards that we could look at changing that in the future if the community thinks that it needs to go a little bit more restrictive. But that is pretty consistent. But like I said, it's a simple matter of striping and some no parking signs if we do look to require that in the final engineering process.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Shank? Mr. Shank, did you want to add anything else? Thank you very much. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make a comment on this final plat. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make a final comment? Mr. Josephson, would you like to make a comment on this? We'll sure listen to you.
Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson. This process started back in November of last year when the Oliver Commons planned unit development came before you. One of the issues here was the subdivision agreement that's been attached. It's been reviewed by staff and the city attorney, and we met with the applicants and came to something that we feel is in both parties' interests. So based upon the information that you have in front of you, the city staff recommends approval. I would like to make a slight amendment to that staff recommends approval of the proposed final plat as submitted on February 19th, 2013. So that would be in the adoption motion. So that would nail that. There were some concerns that were identified, some information that needed to be added to that, and Highlands has worked with that to address it. So they brought forward and addressed those issues in the plat that was submitted today.
Is everyone clear on that? Any questions for Mr. Josephson? Comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the final subdivision plat for Oliver Commons subdivision as submitted on February 19th, as meeting all the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, subject to the 2 conditions listed above.
Thank you, Mr. Krieg. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kovash. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Ms. Shank. Item 3 on our agenda is a final plat. To consider a final plat for Whispering Pines subdivision, generally described in the southwest quarter of Section 15, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting for Whispering Pines.
Morning, Commissioners. Walt Smith with Advanced Engineering here on behalf of the applicant. Here to answer any questions you have on this. We did receive the staff comment on the verbiage of the tract versus the lot that Mr. Jackson caught, and we're going to go ahead and revise that. Otherwise, any questions you have?
Any questions for Walt at this time?
Thank you.
Mr. Smith. Time we'd ask for public comment. If there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this final plat for Whispering Pines, please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make comment? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion. Oh, Mr. Josephson, I'm sorry.
Steve Joseph.
I apologize.
That's quite all right, Steve Josephson, the City of Dickinson. The one thing I would call to your attention is on the final page, because this is a major plat, there is a condition in here that the final plat shall include a line for the signature of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Chairman, please strike that. That's not necessary in this case. And then the only condition was the one that Mr. Smith discussed about. It's just saying that all references on the plat to Tract 2 shall be changed to Lot 2.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph.
So that's the only condition I would propose.
Okay. This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Chairman, I'll make a motion that we recommend, or I move that we I move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the final subdivision plat for the Whispering Pines subdivision, as noted by staff in the application and materials, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, also being in the interest of the public health and safety and welfare, subject to the conditions above.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Walt. Item 4 on the agenda is a special use permit. It's an application to consider a special use permit for a telecommunications tower in the GI zoning district. The property is described as a Lot 3, Block 1 of Kubis subdivision in Section 7, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party applying for the special use permit, please come forward.
Good morning, Planning and Zoning. Oh, Rob Vieira is supposed to be here, but he had talked to Steve yesterday that with weather conditions, he could make it.
So Mr. Kubis, will
So-
identify yourself and...
I'm Dean Kubis, and I own the property where they want to put this tower up.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Kubis? You've met with Mr. Corton?
Yes.
And going along with the recommendations that the city recommends for?
Yep, he said he wanted it 150 feet from any existing buildings. And the tower is supposed to be 180 feet tall.
When would they plan to start building this?
I didn't ask him that. I would guess, they've got the contracts and everything, so I would guess it'd be shortly after, if this is approved.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Kubis?
Mr. Chairman, I think
Mr.
this is similar to the request, and I believe it's the same company that we approved in the county, and they have a tower that's somewhat north of South Hart, I believe. But I'd like Mr. Josephson to probably explain more about it.
Are you satisfied with that, Mr.
I
Elkin,
am
as far as the
satisfied
county goes?
with that, yes.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Kubis? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this special use permit. Please feel free to come forward. Mr. Josephson, would you like to make comment on this item?
Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson. As you stated, this is a request for a special use permit for a 180-foot monopole telecommunications tower. We did receive, since the time I wrote the report, we did receive one phone call in support of, in support of this. I also received an email yesterday from, from Rob Vieira, the applicant's representative, stating that he did review the conditions and did not object to them. As Commissioner Elkin was saying earlier, this is similar to one that was approved in the county. It was a taller tower, and then what we did there was we imposed a number of conditions that they're based on existing cell tower ordinances in other communities. Looked at them in a number of communities, and many of these conditions reflect that. One of the things we do want to see is, because of the nearness of this to the other properties, there was a letter that was submitted from an engineer stating that if the tower did collapse, that it would collapse at the midpoint instead of falling over. And while we asked is that at the time that the building permit is submitted, that they actually submit that letter with a wet seal on it. We also got letters from Mr. Kubis and the property owner to the south saying that they acknowledged the height of the tower and how close it was to their buildings, and they didn't object to it. Therefore, staff recommends approval based upon the conditions that are in front of you.
Mr. Josephson, do those conditions include minimum lightage?
Pardon? The lighting, I believe we had something in here that the lighting becomes an issue in terms of the FAA. So unless required by the FCC or the FAA, the tower shall not be lit. However, there will be security lighting for the equipment shelter on site, and that's fairly standard.
And there's security lighting, does that come under our ordinances where it's non-evasive, it doesn't go off of the property?
Yes, that would be it.
And there's no signage on the towers?
No signage on the towers, and I think that's meant to, I've never seen this happen, but that's meant to keep someone from renting that out and using it as advertising. So
We've done that in the past, on all the special use permits on the towers, but minimal lighting, no signage.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the first one I've had in a telecommunications tower since I've been here. We don't have regulations currently in our code what you're looking at may very well be regulations that we're going to propose to the Planning and Zoning Commission in the future. But I did look at a number of ordinances from several communities, many of which were, in this part of the country and out in the, out in places like Washington State, where these are fairly standard conditions.
I just saw a tower that I thought was unique, and I was wondering if you're familiar with it. Have you ever seen a tower that's made to look like a Christmas tree?
I have, as a matter of fact. I have seen, in my days in Florida, I've seen camouflage towers. Also, one of the things, too, that other communities will do, not to digress too much, is they'll use existing structures like water towers and, municipal buildings, in some cases even church steeples, where cell towers have been located on those. But yes, I've seen some of the camouflage towers, and some of them look pretty good, and some of them look like Lego figures. But yes, there are a number of ways to address that, where you can use existing structures or camouflage it.
I appreciate that you've taken time to look at this and that you're familiar with, towers and how they can be made to look good or bad.
Mr. Chairman, I could also add to that, in my experience, I've dealt with camouflage in towers and so forth. It only works if you have something that's comparable to it. Otherwise, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and everybody laughs at it for the next 40 years. In California, where I came from, outside of L.A., it's pretty arid environment. They had a 200-foot Christmas tree or conifer tree in the middle of a desert region. It just looked like stuck out like a sore thumb, just was ridiculous. It would have looked better if it was a monopole stuck there, and your eyes, after a while, would stop looking at it. So there's the good and there's the bad, too, that I've seen ones that you couldn't even tell as well, but they have to be blended in the environment and be proportionate in height, otherwise they stick out like a sore thumb.
Yes.
The other issue, signage on there, we do not allow off-premise signs within the city or in the ETZ, so that issue is resolved. If somehow they wanted to paint that, do our current code and put Bob's Meat Market or whatever the case would be up there, then they would have to come back and repaint it. So.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, there was a cell tower in Tampa where they tried to camouflage it, but the thing was, it was taller than all the other structures around it, and it really did look like a Lego figure. So everybody knew and laughed at it.
Well, I'm glad you're aware the concept is there, that it's possible to look good, it can be done.
Absolutely, and also to locate them on existing structures, too.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Tews.
I got 2 calls from rural residential people that live in that area, and I just want to point out that their concerns are covered in staff notes 2 and 7. They had concerns about fencing and, parking and other concerns in that area, and I just want to point out that staff's got it covered here in the recommendations. So.
That's, okay, thank you. That's one of the concerns we had with the tower in the county is it's fairly irregular for telecommunication companies to store things, but I know in this county there's so much pressure, to put things, to find any place to store equipment, that we just wanted to make sure that someone didn't come along and say, oh, you've got a fenced-in space, can I put my whatever here that has nothing to do with it? So that way it keeps it clean.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Any questions or comments for Mr. Josephson? Any other questions or comments? This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to consider to approve the special use permit for a telecommunications tower.
Second.
There's been a motion by Mr. Hanson, second by Mr. Tews, and that motion would include all the staff recommendations. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Kubas. Item 5 is a rezone petition. It's considered a rezone petition from to GC, R3, R2P, and AG in the West Ridge First Edition, located in the south half of Section 31, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting this rezone commission. Thank you.
Commissioners, staff, Walt Smith with Advanced Engineering, here on behalf of the applicant, here to answer any questions you may have. It's basically a housekeeping exercise. We had zoned this thing early on, back in the day, and in the final stages of the final plating, we had shifted some lot lines around and that kind of thing. And so we are just cleaning up the zoning to match the platted lot lines and that type of thing. I don't believe we're proposing any new zoning in the area, you know, other than that which we originally zoned. So let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Smith?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This time I'd ask if there's anybody in the public who would like to make comment on this, please feel free to come forward. Mr. Croton, would you like to make comment on this?
Yes. The reason for this rezone is because after we overlaid the zoning district with the plat, after we got the digital copy and put it on our zoning map, we realized that there was inconsistency. So a month and a half ago, I contacted the applicant and let them know that they need to come back and rezone to, in essence, as Mr. Smith has mentioned, to conform to the existing boundaries. So there's been some change. The R3 has been a little reduced from the original for more commercial, and I think that that only makes sense within this development. I believe that's true for the R2 as well, and staff would be in favor of the additional general commercial zone. This is a mixed-use development that is primarily going to be commercial in nature, so staff would support the proposed rezoning as it is today.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Mr. Croton? Any other comments or questions from the public? Please feel free to come forward. Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the rezoning request for West Ridge First Edition.
Thank you, Mr. Elkin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Tews. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Item 5 on a regular agenda day, I'm sorry, item 6, it's a preliminary plat. To consider a preliminary plat for Creekside, attractive land described as a portion of north half of Section 2, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. The property is situated southerly of 10th Street East Extension and westerly of 25th Avenue East. Property is approximately 109 acres. The proposed zoning is a mixture of residential, single-family, and multifamily. This time I'd ask the party presenting this preliminary plat, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, commission members and staff. Thank you for reviewing the preliminary plat this morning. My name is Randy Jenigas. I'm an engineer with SEH representing Meyer Real Estate Development Group. Unless I'm catching this wrong, there may be a few residents in the chairs behind me, and I did bring some extra copies of our plat. They're more than welcome to grab these if they don't. I just would like to do a brief overview of the property, our submittal packet that we submitted to the city, and then some more surveying and engineering brief overview of what we've done with the proposed development. Ed put together a really nice packet, summarized a lot of the details within the development. Please feel free to reference that. It provides a lot of good information for the development, and we can get into those details as needed, but just wanted to give you a quick overview of the property. On the engineering side of things, when they showed me this property, I was really excited. This is really a cool property from an engineering standpoint, from development standpoint. It is an infill property, so there's a few challenges. We're connecting up to 11 streets, existing streets, so that presents some challenges. There's some topography on this property, which also presents some challenges, but in those challenges represents opportunities as well. The creek is a main feature of the development, and we've tried to highlight that within the development. So how we've put all this together is really through a concept called coving. And if residents or commission members have never heard of that before, it's really winding streets. The idea is to reduce the number of intersections, street intersections, which reduces pavement, which reduces maintenance, reduces the number of catch basins. It does a lot of good things. And it also increases green space. Coving also provides really nice winding streets. What we do is we put various setbacks on the lots so that you get different looks as you drive down the street. So instead of a typical grid pattern type street where really all you see is the garages, on this type of layout and development, you get to see a lot more than that. Not just the garages, but side of the homes. You get a lot more features just inside the home. The window accesses look different. You're not looking at your neighbor's house. You get some different views with the coving aspect. It brings all of it together brings a whole unique development. So with that, just wanted to highlight just some features that we've included within the development. One of the main features is right in the center of the development, starting at 14th Avenue East and on the southwest corner of the side of the development. We're extending a trail or sidewalk system all the way through the center of the development. Extends through across 18th Avenue, all the way to the east, all the way to the creek to the east, and then connecting up to the existing or proposed sidewalks that we have for the along the proposed streets. That's one of the main features in the development. It's kind of a center stone for coving type projects. That's the first thing that gets drawn on a development plan when we do coving, is we put in the center trail system and then work around that along with the other features. Moving along to the streets, we have 11 connections to existing streets. However, we only have one four-legged intersection. We believe that's a huge plus. People aren't stopping at stop signs throughout the development. We're not building additional asphalt or concrete. Instead, it's green space. And so we really only have one four-legged intersection, which is at 18th Avenue and the cross street, which we're calling Street A. For right now, we got to come up with better names, obviously. But in the plans, it's shown as Street A. So that's our only four-legged intersection. We're proposing that as a stop condition. On the south leg of that intersection, we've added additional geometrics. We'd like to slow that traffic down as say someone's heading north on 18th Avenue within the development. We have a center median shown where we'd like to put a sign for the development and showing one ways. What that also does is really, that center median creates the opportunity for us to put in a dedicated left turning lane going northbound and then heading west. And so that south leg of that intersection is upgraded for that type of use. That's what we're proposing, that's what's shown in the plan set. The plans are preliminary, they're not final design drawings by any stretch, and we'll need to submit those as we move forward. On the water side of things, we're connecting up to the existing city water system in any water main that's adjacent to the existing development. I think we have, if I counted correctly, 11 connections to the existing water system. We're carrying a 12-inch water main from 10th Avenue all the way to 25th Avenue through the development. On the sewer side of things, we've talked about this at a staff level quite a bit, and we're showing actually two options to handle the sanitary sewer. We've shown the collection system within the development. Ultimately, it connects to the sanitary sewer system along 25th Avenue in either option. And I think us as a development group and staff, we mutually agreed that we'll pick a mutually agreed upon option. One of those options is a lift station to serve the area to reduce depths of the sanitary sewer system. And the other option is a more of an interceptor route, which reduces the lift station or eliminates the lift station. So we're looking forward to working with staff to work through that option. Either way, whichever option that is, it does not affect the lots, the easements that we have shown here today with the preliminary plat. So we've got that covered. Storm sewer or drainage, we've provided a very detailed grading plan. It is called a preliminary grading plan. We provided all of the pad elevations, whether they're a lookout, walkout, or slab-on grade. We provided those elevations along with the contours, the proposed contours of the plan. Again, it's a very detailed set. That aligns with the easements that we have shown within the surveying drawings, and so we've dedicated those easements within the preliminary plat. We have proposed 3 stormwater ponds to handle the drainage, the surface drainage from the development. 2 are located on the east side or near the creek, which is where most of the drainage goes and proposing to go. About 70% of this property goes to the northeast to the creek about, and then the remainder currently right now goes to the west. And we have 1 pond, proposed pond to the west as well to capture that drainage, slow that drainage down before it exits the property. Along with the storm sewer, we have typical, catch basins, storm sewer pipe, and drainage swells within the development to capture that stormwater drainage. Within the larger drainage easements, instead of showing them as easements as requested by staff, we're showing those as tracts within the development, and those would be owned by the HOA within the property. One miscellaneous item just came up yesterday. We've talked to the small utilities or gas and electric. Yesterday we've met with them. Actually, we've talked to them quite a bit and met with them late yesterday afternoon. They provided us a layout for the utilities. I think there is some concerns that, with this type of layout, with this type of coving, that those utilities would be in the front yards. We've actually worked it out with them where the utilities would be in the backyards. And we have a layout that will provide to staff. It looks like this. It's a hand-drawn layout, if you will, but all of those utilities, those gas lines, will be in the backyards where they should be. So I just wanted to point that detail out, that we've worked that out. I will stop talking here shortly and let bring on questions, but I do want to bring up the fact that our original submittal was in the middle of December. We provided a packet full of information in December. Staff reviewed that, provided comments to us. We've addressed those comments, revised our plan set, and resubmitted it and that's the packet that you see here today. It's an extensive packet. It meets your checklist requirements. I believe this is the first major development project where we're going through the major checklist requirements. I think we've gone above and beyond that with providing information to the city, and with the PUD we accept that, and we've done that. With that, I will listen to your comments, questions, or concerns.
Thank you. This time I'd ask if anybody on the commission has comments or questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Okay.
Have you met with emergency services, in particular the fire department?
I think
the concern that I have is probably street width in here.
Okay. We're proposing 32 feet wide streets for all the streets within the development except for 18th Avenue. And 18th Avenue, we're proposing 38 feet wide. With a Coving type project, we actually, on other developments, we've actually done less than that. We've done, because that's kind of the goal of a Coving project, is to have people park in their driveways instead on the streets. That's kind of the whole concept and the goal, because we're pushing the houses back further so they have longer driveways. That's kind of the whole concept, is get that green space out front. But we have talked to, we put together a, before I'll let Brian speak to this, we put together a turning radius diagram. We've taken the standard truck or fire truck that you have, put it on our turning radius diagram, and ran that through our development, and it can easily navigate our system.
So you have met with the fire department, local fire department, and they have no concerns?
No, we met with Chief Sivak, and we also met with the police department as far as the parking issues with the 32-foot roads. What we proposed with Nathan and with Ed was we were going to offset our striping, so there would be a natural one side of the road that would be parked, and then the other side would be striped so you couldn't. Police was fine. Police department was fine with that concept, and Chief Sivak has been fine with how we're doing with the fire department.
Because right now, I'm assuming that you're assuming there will be no parking on streets.
One side only.
Okay.
One side only, yep.
Okay.
Except for the cul-de-sacs, there's no parking in the cul-de-sacs.
Okay. How about the park board or park district? Have you met with them?
Met with James last week, and we will be doing cash in lieu on this one.
Okay.
The cul-de-sacs are 24 feet wide, back to back as they come around.
Oh, I like the concept. It's I've never been a big fan of cul-de-sacs. Somebody will tell you that right now, but you need to do what you need to do.
Mr.
Chairman.
Kovash.
That's the first I hear of that, to be honest with you. When I got this, pardon? You are on a Friday meeting, but just so the commission is aware, as far as best of my knowledge, this has not come in front of the park board as of yet. I talked to when I saw this, I talked to James on Sunday just to make sure I was right. And it hasn't. He had said he talked to Brian, and he is on our agenda for our next meeting. So personally, you know, a preliminary plat is a little premature right now because we haven't even looked at this. And that's the first I hear cash in lieu. I mean, James and I talked about it, but in the meantime, I did have a citizen that lives in the area come and visit with me. In fact, he's in the audience about this, which, you know, I had very little information for him for the fact that I hadn't seen it either. So I think if this were to come to a vote, you know, I would have to vote no at this point. I would rather see it continued just based on the fact that, you know, I see some park stuff in here, but none of this has even been reviewed by any of us.
When I talked with James, he had brought up, you have a city park right here, just on the north end, and then with the large park you guys are doing right out by the interstate. The reason he was looking at a cash in lieu on this one is for a couple of reasons. A, the donations we've done so far with our other developments, I wanted to at least try cash in lieu for once. And then with the cash, basically what he looked at was being able to improve the park directly adjacent to this development, and then also use those funds for the park up near the interstate.
You know, and I don't really know how to answer that, just for the fact that, you know, this really needs to come in front of the whole board to make that decision. It's not really up to James to decide what we're going to do. It's all of us that decide that. As far as the park on the other side, you're right by the interstate. The problem with that is, and I spoke with James about that, is the fact that, you know, for the people on the east side of 10th Avenue, they would have to cross 10th Avenue, which is not really the most desirable road to be crossing at this point in time. The other park by the church there is very, very small. I know there's area to expand, but it's small. So, you know, I don't have a lot to say at this point in time, just for the fact that we as a board haven't discussed this whatsoever. And I think this is one area that we need to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Kovash. Have you had any discussions on the park that's closest to this property? Is that going to be worked on at all?
I'm not sure which, I think the one that's closest to this property, to my knowledge, would be the one that we did in conjunction with, I think it's Hillside Baptist. It's basically on their property. It's very, very small.
Okay.
I think that would be the closest. However, we have looked at, and it looks like we probably will be designing a park which would be on the west side of 10th Avenue East near the interstate. We have a fairly large piece of property there. And yes, that will likely be a fairly good-sized park, but again, for anybody on the east side of 10th, they would have to cross 10th. And I don't know how good that is. Besides that, there's an awful lot of new homes out on that east side. So I don't know how the park board is going to feel about it. I just, you know, I wouldn't be ready to do anything on this just because it is a big piece of property, and I think we need to decide what, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this. Nobody else has seen this but myself and James.
Thank you.
Chairman, could I respond to that, please? I think there's a lot of, respect your concerns, truly do. Through every step of the process, we've been trying to work with any of the staff's concerns or city concerns through the process, and Brian and I are here to say that we'll continue to do that, no doubt about it. There's some opportunities on this property to, you know, if we do need to, instead of a cash payment for parks, maybe some green space for parks, there's places to do that on this property. However, we have had this plan into the city since the middle of December. I understand the city's extremely busy. I get that. And so I just respectfully request to have that maybe as a condition of the preliminary plat, that it wouldn't get tabled. That'd be a condition of the plat that we work through that issue. We'll be at your meeting and work through that issue. There's some opportunities here on this property to do various things, but I just request that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I could address that. There's two parts. A month ago, we sent comments to the Parks District, to James. Never received anything back. We do that for every project that we do. The second part of it falls upon the applicant, is that as part of the checklist, it notes in there, before you submit your preliminary plat, you need to get approval from the Parks District. So it's not going to fall on the Parks Board at all. It ultimately falls upon the applicant to have that issue resolved prior to the preliminary plat submittal. So,
Thank you, Mr.
based
Croton.
upon that, you can make your decision whichever way you want to go with respect to that.
With all due respect that we have to give the park board, park commission, ultimately, they do have a say in this, and that working through this is really an agreement that they fully have to agree to.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
I've got a number of comments, but maybe the most important one to me is that, well, first of all, I think the layout is good. I think it will be an attractive subdivision for our community. I think it will add a lot to our community. It's housing we need, and I really want to see this go forward. Having said that, this project has some rather complex engineering issues with it that a lot of subdivisions don't have. And staff is going to be under a lot of pressure to review a lot of those things, and they're going to take some time. So I have concerns. I know the developer wants to move this along, and I'd like to see it moved along, but I know it's going to put a lot of pressure on staff. A little bit of conversation I've had with Mr. Croton. I don't want to speak for you, but it seems that you guys feel you can do a concurrent review as we progress to the final plat and do the rezoning and all. But as the staff gives on that, I think these guys are going to have to give a little bit, and I think there will need to be some things in the development agreement that maybe don't give the developer quite the guarantees he'd like to see, simply because that review is going to take time and all. I don't know how we address that this morning, but I just think we all need to recognize that. I do want to say that, Mr. Jenigas, this is a tremendous submittal. It's got great detail, and I really think that this should be a model for what we see in future preliminary plats of this magnitude. This is a major subdivision, and the engineer has really given us some good information. I expect the staff won't agree with all that information, but the point is that the detail is really good. It's really a good submittal. Mr. Jenikas has pointed out a couple of the engineering issues that have to be resolved yet, but he's given us good data already to help resolve some of those things. There's some other detail. I'm finding myself disappointed this morning that you guys have come this far and that the park thing is not taken care of. I can't believe that that's happened. I really can't, with all the effort you guys have put into this. At some point, and I don't know, Mr. Croton, if it needs to be today or how we do this, but we do need to talk about the street width thing. I'm not in favor of the narrower street widths. I know it's been done a lot of other places. I'm not saying that it can't be done. There are other locales that have done this. You can measure street widths different ways. The way we measure them in Dickinson, these are actually 31-foot widths in comparison to what we have as 40-foot widths in pretty much all of Dickinson. Everything that's been done in the last 30 or 40 years, it's all 40-foot widths. These are 31. I could go through a list here of reasons why I don't think we should do this, but we can talk about that some more later. But I just don't think it's right for us. We don't live in a place where a metropolitan area where land is such a commodity that we can't do 40-foot streets as we traditionally have. It won't change the layout of the subdivision, and I feel strongly about that. Maybe that's enough for now.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. And I'd like to ask some questions on your comments. Is there somewhere in between 31 and 40 feet that's acceptable or usable from an engineering standpoint? Because I'd like to hear the engineering perspective, I'm not an engineer, but I have great faith that engineers can do, with the resources, can do almost anything, build anything, and make it workable.
Well,
So
again-
they're somewhere between 31 and 40. And then along with that, who owns the streets? Who's going to own the streets? Who's going to own the public walkways in there? Who's going to maintain them? And who's going to enforce the regulations? How much input is the HOA going to have on this when it comes to violations according to the HOA? Are there going to be a fine line there that the city isn't going to be held responsible for something that an HOA should be doing? And then the implication of community property, community walkways, is that going to conflict with what the park district wants to do, or is it going to aid in what they want to do? So, I would
Mr.
like to
Chairman,
hear on
I could address those. Throughout the staff report and the discussions we've had with them, we've addressed those issues. Everything excluding of the road construction is essentially going to be part of the HOA. The trails, the open space tracks. The reason for that is to, instead of having the property owner, because this is going to be a very, very specific grading plan. If you've looked at it, they have significant slopes, and we wanted to ensure that we wouldn't have unnecessary construction after the grading of the lots, and then your erosion control plan doesn't work because people have chipped away a little bit on this end and that. So what we've proposed is that they are either labeled as tracks, which most of the steep slope areas are labeled as tracks, and the ownership is going to be part of the HOA in order to maintain that. As part of that, we wanted to have native vegetation and vegetation that would not have to be mowed. One that would work in this area that doesn't have to be mowed due to the steep slope. So to avoid the problems that we've had in other developments in which you've had gradings of lots, and then all of a sudden the property owners don't know that certain portions of their lot are part of the overall drainage plan, and they alter that, and then that causes impacts to their project, their home, along with the adjacent homes as well. The road issue, functionally, you can look around the nation. There are roads that are 28-foot wide, 32-foot wide, and there's variations thereof. 32 can work. It boils down to a perception issue and an issue of your desires for road design. 40-foot could work when you have two sides, you have parking on both sides. 32 could work just as well, and it has worked in other communities where you have it on one side. All you've done is you've reduced it for 8 foot, and you've removed parking on one side. So, it can work. The issues that other jurisdictions have commented on in past experience is how do you deal with the issue of plowing? When you only have it on one side of the road, you get buildup of the ice berms and the rest. That's always problematic no matter where you're at. But functionally it can work, and I'll let Nathan talk in his past experience about that as well. It boils down ultimately to, on an engineering level, you can make it work, and there's many jurisdictions around the nation, and northern ones, that show that they have worked as well. It ultimately will come down to our current standard is 40 foot. Allowing a reduction to 32 foot, even though this is a different development than our standard traditional cookie cutter grid style developments that we have in this city, may establish a precedent, and that is a concern that staff raised. And we look at this as not establishing a precedent because there's other issues that are addressed here. They have shown greater open space, meandering roads that I think are better, more appealing. They are traffic calming with respect to that. The trail system and the overall design is more innovative. So as from my perspective as the community development director, I think this development is highly desired and one that's good. But I think with respect to Commissioner Jackson's comments, it ultimately boils down to a decision from the Planning Commission Do you want to relax that standard for this development? And do you feel that that would be a precedent setter? And if it is, then you vote whichever way you feel. But functionally, it could work either way. But I'll let Mr. Peck talk about that as well. But I think that probably answers the question with respect to Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Cardon. Nathan, did you want to make comment at this time?
Sure. With respect to the roadway issue, I've been a consultant in other communities in the state of Illinois, and over there, like Ed had mentioned, you see a variety of design philosophies throughout the communities. I've worked in communities where they have just 24 wide roads, all the way up to 40. So, and everywhere in between. I think it's a philosophical discussion about what the community wants, and it also bridges other departments beyond planning and engineering. I mean, it kind of touches base on the emergency services that you provide, Public Works Department operations. So it can work however way you want it to. It just may require an adjustment of multiple departments of the city and to support that with other operational functions. So I'm not going to get into a heavy detailed discussion on the philosophy and the planning issues, but I'll just comment that I've seen it work in a variety of different ways. It's just you got to make sure that it's mirrored or partnered with other issues that support that. I think that moving this forward and working some of those things into the development agreement, you could do it either way you want to do it with this community. I think Ed's right also, though. Staff has raised concerns with, is this going to be the new standard for the city of Dickinson? And our current version of our comp plan is not suggesting to go in this direction. So I think that's something that you guys have to just decide on a philosophical level. I will make another comment on the details of the package, though. We have been working with the applicant on some of our preliminary comments with the engineering issues. What you see before you in this packet today, the concepts are there. We've reviewed some of the details in order to support a development agreement conditions or conditions of approval for your plat. But not every detail that you see in the packet is something that has been approved or that the staff is on board with. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Mr. Peck.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make two comments, please, real quickly. I think we'd probably agree to disagree, Mr. Jackson, on street widths, respectfully. But I do want to make one comment with street widths, and that is regarding maintenance and maintenance costs for the city. I've yet to see a city where the city maintenance budget is more than what they need. In our design, and we can prove this, that we have 30% less streets within our design. That's intersections, that's narrower streets, and so on. If you could go to the Public Works budget and reduce that by 30%, I think that would be a really, I mean, look what they could do with an additional 30% budget. I think that's a big deal. That's a lot of value. So these will be maintained forever, and we're suggesting that this reduces that by 30%. Thank you.
Also, if I may add, I guess, on the 32-foot version of this, in large part it's done because we have no desire to have a parking lot in our neighborhood. I mean, if you look at, it's like you said, if you look at the Colving effect and what you're trying to accomplish, you're trying to get cars off the street. You're giving them longer driveways. You're trying to give a more green look. If we drive through a lot of neighborhoods in Dickinson, we see a plethora of white pickup trucks on one side, down the other. The goal with this entire concept is to eliminate that. So, number one, to put 40-foot streets in there literally destroys the entire concept. Number two, 40-foot roads in this would also, I don't remember what the exact number is, it's an enormous loss of lots in comparison to what we're doing here. It would quite honestly probably make this project not happen. So it got down to just numbers to a degree. We need to get those in there. But like I said, ultimately, the entire Colvin concept requires, I mean, if you're going to cram cars all over the streets, it makes little difference to make deeper setbacks and make your houses look like this, because all you're going to see is cars up and down the street. So,
Mr. Chairman, my question to Brian would be,
Mr. Elkin.
what's going to prevent people from parking on both sides of that street?
well, A, they're going to be literally parking in a drive lane.
Enforcement out there all the time writing tickets, right?
Yeah, and we did talk with the police department about that. And we offered to assist with that within our HOA if we needed it. We said that we could help patrol that, call and have vehicles towed, and the police department said that that wouldn't be necessary, that would be, that they could take care of it.
I think, you know, the data on maintenance costs and all that are fine, but I think the real question is safety. Is there any data showing that new communities that have this type of design and the houses are built with the best of fire codes, and you probably have very little fire concerns, but you probably have concerns for ambulances. I think, to me, that in a new construction, the biggest thing is getting an emergency vehicle in to take care of a personal problem, not a fire or the such. And do you have data that shows that these are just as safe to live in a community that has 32-foot wide roads as 40-foot wide roads?
I guess, well, the quickest answer to that would be, I come from Fargo. Residential neighborhoods in Fargo have 32-foot roads, and you park on both sides. And I guess I haven't heard of ambulance troubles or fire truck troubles or any of those things. So like we said, to go from a 40 to a 32, we're eliminating a park lane. You have the same amount of drive space as you had before. You're just simply eliminating people parking on the road.
And that's the strong thing. Eliminating it should be 100% eliminating. There shouldn't be a question between the HOA and city law enforcement or traffic enforcement. There should be no question. Okay, there should be like, you park on the wrong side of the road, you get towed. There's no, going to write a piece of paper and stick it. You just get it out of there, because
Our goal with our HOA was to have them immediately towed, and
Right.
and it'd be a really good
And
size.
HOA, who's going to, yeah, but I belong to an HOA, and I'm not going to sit out there and call things in, okay?
The difference would be is our HOAs have, we have several. Obviously, we have all of Sundance, we have Pinecrest, we have this. We have a very large property management arm that will handle all of these things. We'll have dedicated people dealing with security and drive-throughs and those types of things. Our HOA function within the city of Dickinson is probably larger than all of the other HOAs combined in town right now.
And in 10 years, if this fails, who's going to take care of it?
Well, we would have to be in a whole lot of trouble, because we would have, you think about the amount of rental units and everything that our company has and holds that we.
Well, I'm looking a long ways into the future. I do believe these people that are going to live here, whether the HOA fails or that arm of the HOA becomes dysfunctional, who's going to be concerned about their safety when people congest the roads and take care of their safety needs?
What I think the biggest question, unless I'm hearing you incorrectly, with safety is access.
Right, whatever it is, has to access it.
Emergency vehicles have to access. We're not limiting that. We're not limiting that at all between 40 and 32 feet wide. There's no elimination of that whatsoever. The only thing that we're eliminating is parking on one side. The driving lanes are still 12 feet wide on each side to allow access.
I know you're not you're eliminating the width, but you're not eliminating the access, but you're also not eliminating people's attitudes. And that's the problem, is if you can have 100% success, which nobody does, then you've got it covered. But you have to have an agreement ahead of time with the city, because this is probably going to be here 50 years from now, 60 years from now, and you know how many, there's thousands of failed HOAs in the United States. So a lot of them have failed. And they're begging for more money. They're begging cities to take over their streets. So what's to ensure from the very beginning that you have an agreement with the city to take care of this problem that could occur for the safety of these people? That's what we're talking about, the safety. You can get in there if the 32-foot wide street's open, fine. But if it's not, and the HOA isn't on top of it from the beginning, who are they going to count on to do their job? The City of Dickinson Police Department. And they have to have access for the fire department, for the emergency vehicles.
Okay, so, one second. So how we're dealing with that right now, take the HOA out of the picture as far as emergency access. HOA, throw them out of the picture. We're proposing parking on one side, striping it that way and signing it that way. And that'll be in our final plans.
And that will be enforced by the city.
That's correct.
Okay.
The other thing to remember is even at 32 feet, even if everybody in our neighborhood illegally parks on both sides of this street, you have an 8-foot section, you have an 8-foot section, you still have 16 feet in the middle. There's still enough room to drive 2 vehicles through that area. So if there is an ambulance, if there's a fire truck, you're not restricting access. You still have, if we put it at 24 feet and somebody would park on both sides of the street, you could have an issue. But at 32 feet, you still have room to drive a fire truck and an ambulance through at the same time, even if people are illegally parked.
On a perfect day, and if you can decide what the emergency is going to be, that's true. But emergencies don't occur at the perfect convenience for everyone. I mean, I believe this is a really nice design, but I think some of those little things that really can affect people's lives are probably the most important.
We did have the police chief and the fire chief in on the negotiations with Ed from the very beginning of it.
Rest assured?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I just want to reaffirm too, I don't know that I'm ready to lax from the 40 feet road streets width right now, but I'm open to it. I do have a couple other comments or questions regarding, the layout and such. One, I'm hearing that the State Health Department is becoming more urgent and requiring on their looping of their water lines and including those going into cul-de-sacs. And it appears that the ones shown here were dead-ended. That might be something maybe the city's already looked at too. But in addition to that, I guess my main comment would be, how does this fit into the master plan? I'm understanding that possibly 10th might be designated an urban road on that north side. Not sure that, that they're showing the north and east portion of 10th being, future road by others. Not sure if that's even doable in that wetland area over there. So would that force 10th to come through the winding road into a 32-foot street of a designated urban road? If that's so the case, maybe Ed has comments, or maybe that's been addressed.
With respect to your comments, Commissioner Krieg, 10th will be built to a collector standard. We'll have a 10-foot separated multi-use trail, so it will be consistent to our road standards for a collector. The way that 10th will be designed, if you look on the site plan itself, you see the exempted parcel on the northwest side. 10th would be built from the northwest corner up to that piece, and then beyond that point where you see the townhouses, they'll be built to the point in which you see where the creek would be located and the brown shaded future road construction by the others. They're in the process of working with the Army Corps on doing a LOMAR. That's why that they didn't include that the area around the creek at this point. That's going to be an out parcel that they're going to come back subsequent to this, probably in the next couple of months, however long it takes us to get finished up with Army Corps. And then they're going to complete 10th Street East. That will be constructed by the applicant to our current standards, so that should alleviate your fears. The connectivity, though, of the existing Chinago Homestead, that will not be built until such time as that piece becomes developed. But when you look at the interior configuration of the roads, you could go from 10th Street, going through their main road, to the point in which they had mentioned where they'd have a four-way stop, and then you proceed directly north. And then after 10th is built, you would have direct access through the development that way, or you can meander through the development, and then 25th Street's going to be upgraded as well. As part of this development, they'll have to pay their fair proportionate share, and we're looking at putting that also as part of our capital improvement plan for the funding of that. So, I think that, to address your condition on 10th, that is not going to be changed. 10th Street will not be changed. You'll have to meet our current standard.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
10th Street leaves a lot of questions, as well as 25th Avenue. A lot of questions for us from a funding standpoint, and when it should be built, who will pay for it. I think there's even still a question of whether or not it should be built in certain areas. So there's a lot to look at there, I think, from an engineering standpoint and a funding standpoint, and that'll have to be done as staff develops the development agreement, and I don't think we need to determine any of that right now. But it does bring back to the street widths, because I think there's a real good chance that it may be many, many years before 10th Street is constructed in its entirety, and if ever. I hope it is, and I think we should have the intent to build it, but it will certainly be many years, and what's going to happen is that's going to move the traffic through the middle of the subdivision until that portion of 10th gets built. So we need to consider that also when we're thinking about the street widths. These are not large lots. It'll still be a nice subdivision, but most of the lots average 60 and 65 feet. That means putting parking on one side. You have driveways on average closer together. In some cases, they'll be far apart. But on average, you're going to try to fit that parking in between driveways into lots that are a little bit smaller than what we have in the rest of the community. I don't disagree with anything that Mr. Catan, Mr. Peck have said, and again, I'll say we can make this work at 31 feet. We can make it work at 35 or 38. We can make it work. It's really what we want in our community in the end. It's what we want to have. I don't know how we would say no to a future request for 31-foot widths if we say yes to this. I don't know how we would say no to a future request. I don't understand the comment about losing lots if we change the street width. The right-of-ways, it appears to me, are going to be 60 feet regardless of the width of the actual street. So
we lose lot sizes to where we'd have to do exceptions. We would lose lot. I mean, if you look along this road where we had to do the exception in the back for the track along the main road, you take a bunch more, you take more feet, footage off the frontage again, and we're going to lose that there. Also, as far as the road widths, all of Sundance that's been platted and built is all at the same 32-foot level.
That's true. That's true. It's 31.
Yep.
31 face of curb.
Okay.
And I drove up there yesterday, and the Coves might be a nice subdivision, but I didn't like what I saw for street widths. When you think about Suburbans and 3/4-ton pickups, we have a lot of those in this area. I didn't like it.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a quick comment? I know we've talked about this, but our whole idea, this whole coving concept is around the idea of having front green space. It creates a really nice estate look. If we're going to widen streets, that really reduces that. That goes against our whole concept of the whole plan. And so this is a big deal for us as far as a look and appearance to the development, is going to a wider street. That's a very big deal, going from 31 feet as face-to-face to 40 feet. It's a major, major deal. It really impacts how the style of our development looks. If we're going to go in with that concept, then we'd have to completely redraw how this this whole thing looks, and it'd probably look more like a grid pattern.
Okay, what you're talking about, Mr. Jenigas, is that you would lose 4.5 feet of turf, correct?
Yeah, on each side, and then we'd have to revise, you know, how those setbacks look on those homes as we cove around and place those homes. And then that would, it impacts our development.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand that comment, but,
And I think it almost, I like your comments, Mr. Jackson, like the difference between 31 and 40, there's got to be some place in between that would work for your purposes and probably fit what engineering and safety and road width that Mr. Jackson refers to also. And the flavor of the community is large vehicles. A lot of 3/4 ton pickups, campers, whatever the rest of it. Now, you don't expect that here. But, you know, there's some place in between that this would work for your concept of the open spaces and the look. Maybe a 33.5 or 34 or whatever it is. And parking on one side, yes, you still have that, you know, enough for 2 lanes. I think that, you know, I believe that you don't have to go from 31 to 40. I mean, why that? Whoever came up with that, and it's a standard that's been used because of larger vehicles, the way roads and sewers all went together, and curbs and gutters and setbacks, and this is different. But I really was wondering how, speaking about the roads that Mr. Krieg brought up, how do you plan on developing this? Is there all of it to be done in a short order, or is it phases?
Getting to your first question, as far as how did we come up with 32 versus 40, that really comes from one parking side, 8-foot parking side. That's where that comes from. It's not magic, it's just an 8-foot stall parking. That's where that comes from, but just to answer that question. We're planning, as you've seen with the grading plan, the grading needs to work together, and so we're planning on mass grading the site altogether as one. Our plan is, through talking with a grading contractor, is to start at 18th Avenue and work each direction. That works with our grading work. It kind of works with everything, with utilities and so on and so forth. So we're planning on completing, doing all this first phase as one project.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Corton.
You know, I know that the road issue would be one that the commission struggles with, and the precedent issue is one that, you know, concerns staff as well. You know, how would we differentiate this project compared to another one? I think it, just on its own merits, I think you could compare this compared to your standard traditional design and say that they're apples and oranges. That being said, you know, ultimately a decision, you know, would have to be made by you as a commission, irrespective of whichever way staff supported or recommended denial of a project. You know, I know you're struggling with that issue. You know, depending on whichever way you decide to go, I think that in many ways, if you feel that this is a precedent set, you should probably should probably discuss this in greater detail before you make any further decisions. That would be my recommendation for anything that we're changing, something that you feel would be dramatic, that you would have difficulty with future developments of differentiating or determining which ones are different from the others. So, you know, if that's the main point of contention at this point, maybe a continuance on this until you have come collectively with a consensus with respect to the road widths. You know, that would help staff to understand your direction of ultimately, you know, is there a consensus with respect to the Planning Commission on reducing road widths, you know, to limit the hard surface. You know, there's benefits of limiting that for stormwater, aesthetics, and everything else, but there's also the perception issue of what we've had in our community values. So If that's a main contention with the majority of members, I would suggest that this issue would be continued until you've come up with a consensus to be able to provide that to the developer before you make a decision. But that's, whichever way you decide to go is ultimately yours.
To make it perfectly clear, I would like to know for sure, the road widths in Sundance, do we have 31, 32-foot road widths there? Is that on the books?
Well, the coves, the way that it was approved is similar to this style, yes. The village received preliminary approval, and it would be the same, in essence, design to this. Myers Development is proposing this one, and their subsequent one to this would be Pinecrest, the same design. So the question is, do you feel comfortable with that? You can, if you don't, then this, you would ultimately just say, no, we're not in favor of it, and recommend denial with respect to that, or require the condition to be 40 foot from this point on. But, that's a discussion that ultimately the Planning Commission needs to make. As staff, I feel that, providing an innovative design, the meandering roads have a calming effect. They are aesthetically better. I think they enhance the property values as long as the roads are functional. As long as you don't have meandering that's going like this, but it's like that, you could still have emergency and police can still have sufficient time. It's not going to reduce their response times dramatically in any way, shape, or form. It just ultimately boils down to a perception issue, and I think that might be one that you need to hammer out before you can move forward with this development, if that's where you're leaning today.
But that's what I would hope to get a little clarity on that, on the road widths. The road widths that were approved prior to this, that were 31 or 32 foot wide, did not establish a precedence. They were looked at individually, that it would function in that particular design. And the cul-de-sacs were not such large that they caused a safety issue. As the design here, the cul-de-sacs here are not large. They're easily accessed. So we are actually looking at a specific design, not establishing a precedent for 31-foot wide roads. And we should make that very clear if we go forward with it, even if we do put it on a contingency or delay action on this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my viewpoint, is that there's no precedent being set. We're looking at this as an individual project. The safety issues, the cul-de-sacs, the design, the flow, how it's going to serve, the roads are going to serve this group of residential people. So I'm hoping otherwise the precedent's already been set with Sundance. And that wasn't so. We looked at that as an individual project, as a PUD.
With respect to your comments, yes and no. I think that it's always difficult to be able to, in the jurisdictions that I spoke to, and I put comments in your packet materials, they've had developments like this, and I called them up, and for the most part, they were all in favor. One jurisdiction said they would not do that because I think it was more of maintenance issues. They had issues with plowing. But the majority of them were in favor of the development. But they only had one, it's best I could tell, is only one development within your jurisdiction. This would be the second one that they are proposing in our jurisdiction. With respect to the coves, yes, that was one that we approved last year. It's still untested, and that's always the difficulty. Many jurisdictions will approve an innovative design and say, okay, we'll allow this, but we want to have a couple of years of history before we approve anything more to see if it actually works functionally, and does the community accept it, and does it reduce or enhance the property values with that development. That's kind of where we're at on this one here. The other development is still under construction. Houses haven't been built. We haven't went through a winter yet to see how plowing, and we haven't had emergency responses to see if there's been any difficulties with that. So it's an untested case. But this concept is not one that we are first to develop this here. Rick Harrison has done this throughout the nation, but many designs such as 32 or 40 ultimately boil down to a philosophical issue as a community. Do you want to have wider roads? You can maintain 32 just as much as 40. They require additional modifications so that you make sure that you plow them so that you could provide the emergency vehicles, but functionally they could work. So I understand it's a very difficult issue. As I mentioned in my staff report, initially I was opposed to it because that's our standard and that's what we've talked about generally in our comprehensive plan, but reviewing it on its merits, I changed that and calling up from other jurisdictions. But as a commission member, you have to make a decision with respect to what you feel is best for the community on that.
Yes, sir.
In regards to the comprehensive plan and putting together the standards for street widths, you know, I've helped communities put those together. I've helped communities I've been in Mr. Peck's position, am in his position in a few communities. You know, when you're reviewing a comprehensive plan, I'm not sure if you're actually thinking about this type of development when you're thinking about street widths and those sorts of standards. Because with this type of development, it's a whole different approach. And so those standards really are thought about, at least when I think of a comprehensive plan and developing standards, in a more grid pattern type situation and not in this type of development. So I'd just like to make that comment to the commission. And then the other one regarding precedents, you know, this is a unique PUD. Each one that Meyer Development Group does is unique. Each site is unique, and we're offering unique features on each one. And so I highly disagree with any precedents being set, although I'm not in your position either. But I think I can make a strong argument that a precedent isn't being set, that you can review each one individually. And if someone wants to come in that meets your zoning requirements, and they say, well, you did it in the coves, well, you could say this is a PUD, and this was based on these merits and a different type of design. I think that argument could be made all day long.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for some comments from Mr. Colding after a 5-minute recess. This meeting at this time, I had 2 questions I wanted Mr. Colding to comment on, if he would please. One is on setting precedences, and if these PUDs we're looking at setting a precedent, or if they're 100% individually looked at, considered that this is something unique. And also, depending on which way this goes, am I asking for an opinion if I should continue on with this on public comment or not?
Well, Mr. President, Commissioners will take the second question first. Be my recommendation that you do take public comment. It was advertised as a public hearing, and I would recommend that you do take public comment on the matter. With respect to the issue of precedent, I would come down sort of in the middle of the 2 options that you outlined there. In some sense, yes, it does set a precedent. Precedent is sort of a fancy word for something that precedes another thing. So by approving this, it is a precedent. You do have a decision out there that you have allowed 31 or 32-foot street in the past. So in some sense, that is a precedent. It may not be a binding precedent for you. It may not be something that you have to follow in the future. Our current subdivision code does set forth the minimum road widths. In our code, it's at 40 feet is the minimum road width. The code does allow you to deviate from that upon a demonstration of special circumstances. The one development that was approved with a 31-foot street, the Sundance development, there were special circumstances for that, and that was taken care of with the development agreement so that those special circumstances were defined and demonstrated within that agreement. You could do something very similar with this. This is a PUD, proposed as a PUD, will require a PUD agreement, and the deviation from the road standards and code can be made part of that agreement as well. if you do decide to go to a 31 or 32-foot street for this development. So there are special circumstances that you can find for this development and allow for a less than 40-foot street. And it may not bind you for future developments unless they can demonstrate the same sort of special circumstances that you would find for this development. So you do have to take all these things individually and decide whether or not there are special circumstances that exist to allow you to deviate from a 40-foot road width. If you don't find that those special circumstances exist, then the code would mandate that it be a 40-foot road. I'm not sure if that completely answers your question or confuses the issue more, but that's at least what our code would say on it. If I could address a couple other concerns that I guess have come up. There's some talk about the road widths and emergency access vehicles. It's my understanding from the fire department that they require a 20-foot unobstructed width in order to proceed down a road, taking into account one 8-foot wide parking stall. You're looking at 28 feet there. So at least under normal summertime ideal conditions, a 31 or 32-foot road would be sufficient for at least one emergency vehicle to go down that road. I think the real issue is whether people are going to park where they're supposed to park, and then snow removal, and the extent to which that reduces the passable driving distance for an emergency vehicle to go through. City staff do enforce those things. We have other areas in town where there is restricted parking, and we have offset center line on other areas in town. So city staff, police department does enforce those things. It's a question of staff and getting staff out to take care of those problems when they exist, but at least the legal authority to remove those vehicles, have them towed from an illegal parking spot does exist. We have major snow events that of course reduces the drivability of that road and the distances that emergency vehicles can go down. Beyond that, as I mentioned earlier, we would anticipate that there would be a planning unit development agreement along with this development, and a lot of the conditions and requirements, parking, HOAs, center lines of roads, width of roads, all of that can be addressed in a development agreement should you choose to move forward with this matter at this time. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. And I see Mr. Sivak is in the audience. If I could ask him to make comments, if he would like to, on this, I would greatly like to hear his comments on fire safety.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Commissioners, for bringing up the concerns concerning emergency services and our response. It is great to see that that is in the forefront of your concerns and your thoughts as you look at these developments. Mr. Colling has done an excellent job of summarizing our concerns. I don't know that I really need to add more to that. We have met with Mr. Bachman, as he has stated, and most of the concerns, many of the concerns that you've expressed this morning are the same ones that we talked with them about in our meetings. The adopted city fire code, the 2009 International Fire Code, requires for fire department access that we have 20 feet unobstructed under all conditions. That's our concern. Whatever takes place in agreements, procedures between the developer and the city to make that comfortable and to ensure that we have that, I guess, is the question. Maybe where you're talking about snow removal versus snow plowing as an example. I'll answer any questions you may have specifically. Otherwise, I believe our concerns have been answered by Mr. Colling's comments.
Mr. Sivak, on the issue of snow removal or snow plowing, do you have recommendations? Are you familiar with what would occur there on parking on one side, snow removal or snow plowing, and is it enforceable to ensure that your vehicles could get through there if needed, that the snow would be moved to the berm or past it?
That's truly a million-dollar question. I don't know that I have the answer for that. In the case of large snow events, there have been times where we've barely been able to make it down Highway 22 until the crews have gotten out and removed the snow, because initially, the only thing city crews can do is plow it and windrow it. So there comes a point in time where that becomes a problem no matter what. After a large and emergency-type snow event takes place, generally, city crews get out and remove snow and give us the access that we need. I guess in a development like this, my concern would be through normal snow events. As the plowing takes place and the windrow builds up, is there going to be a point in time where it's recognized that, well, now that windrow is encroaching on access and it should be removed? I don't have a good answer for you there, Mr. Chairman. I guess I defer that to the engineering department and to others to help us ensure that we maintain the access that we need.
Anybody else would like to ask Mr. Seelock a question? Yeah, Mr. Jackson.
You know, in fairness, we should recognize there will be a boulevard on all these streets, true? True. So in theory, the snow is going to be piled onto the boulevard. Now, obviously, you're going to have cars in the way at times, that won't happen, things like that. But in theory, the snow should be able to be windrowed onto the boulevard.
Any other comments or questions from Mr. Seelock while we've got him here?
Mr. Chairman, my
Mr. Alphen.
concern would be, you know, Gene, in theory, everything works well in theory. The fact of the matter is, my concern happens to be with illegal parking. You take two vehicles, and if say you have parking on one side of the street, but they're illegally parked on the other side, now you're down to 16 feet, are you not?
Yes.
And that is where there really is an issue. Snow also is an issue. If the city could remove the snow as well as the county does, that wouldn't be an issue. That's not going to happen. But
That's what we call a snow job.
But my problem is illegal parking.
And humans are, you know, imperfect, but in those cases, and maybe you haven't seen them, but I would guess you have, people are illegal parked anyway when you're trying to get an emergency vehicle, you'll remove them.
We have an area in town right now, in the northwest part of town, not to get real specific, where our fire department access roads are the minimum width. There should be no on-street parking. And there is an agreement between that location and the city police department to ticket anybody that's on the street. Yet on a daily basis, because human nature being what it is, whether you're county or city, human nature being what it is, there's always somebody parked on that street. Unfortunately, at the time of an emergency, that's not the time for us to be calling, and we may not be aware of it until that time. We may not be aware that we don't have access until we experience the fact that we don't have access. There's just no way to be cognizant of all those areas constantly. And then these things happen. And that's my concern. My concern with the 24-foot road width in the cul-de-sacs would be exactly that. Will people park on the street in the cul-de-sacs? But I guess what I'm saying is, by fire code, and what the fire code gives us for a concern to carry forward to you, is we need 20 feet unobstructed. If that 20 feet unobstructed can be given to us and given to you, presented to you in the development package in a way that city engineering and public works is comfortable, then our concerns have been addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
You know, we're spending a lot of time talking about street width. There's a lot of other important parts of this plat too, and you know, conversation's gotten kind of negative when it's a really good plat. It's a good project. I'm wondering if we shouldn't go ahead and take public comment, and that may affect some of what our thinking is, and then come back to some of these issues.
That's good. I too think it's a nice layout. Do you have any other comments at this time, Mr. Chairman?
We'll wait till public comments and then we can address them.
Maybe. At this time, then, I would ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this, please feel free to come forward. Let us know who you are and your address.
My name is Kevin Marks, 1361 3rd Avenue East. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Board. Thank you for getting up in the morning. I want to address Mr. Abrahamson's comment about HOAs and PUDs. He is correct about the fact that it is a trend in the United States that these do fail, and they can fail catastrophically in a town, and then it's back on the city. And so that should be questioned and studied. That is a problem out there. And it's a problem that I have talked about before. We're in a fundamental change here in the world of real estate development between Euclidean codes and form-based codes. A form-based code would alleviate this HOA PUD problem. It's the same with the PUDs in the commercial districts. When you don't have a form-based code, you have to rely on HOAs and PUDs to make the code work. But what is not taken into account is if there's an economic change is what it leaves the cities with. And the answer, it's very clear, it leaves the city with these, administering these HOAs and PUDs. So very much keep that in question. Another thing I want to address here, this is not a traditional neighborhood. This is a conventional or a Euclidean neighborhood. It is not a traditional. A traditional neighborhood is right here downtown. This land use pattern that we're in right now is a traditional land use pattern. It has alleyways. And I would like, please don't address this as a traditional neighborhood. It simply is not. Now, concerning the layout in here, the street plans are laid out in what is called a curvilinear plan. It is not a calming effect. It actually makes you car sick when you drive through it. So I have a disagreement with the calming effect. It makes you car sick driving through it. When you do curvilinear on a flat surface, it makes people car sick. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I think that's it to my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make comment. Please feel free to come forward.
Yeah, Matt Krebs, 1123 9th Street East. I've been a resident in that Washington 4th, by the way, since about 25 years. Anyhow, concerning parks, we have no parks in the vicinity of any size. Nearest one, Rocky Butte Park or Rec Center or Fisher Addition, and this is about the last chance we're going to get. Painted Canyon, new subdivision here in the last year or two, has no park in there. Fisher Second, no park to the south. Carroll Addition years ago has a little one on 10th Avenue. It's got about 2 pieces of equipment in it. Scott mentioned one up by along the interstate there, but there's nothing there right now, and that's on the other side of 10th Avenue. Otherwise, we got to go all the way to Museum, by the museum there, Pioneer Park. So we're kind of limited to parks, so I would be in favor of a park. I'm sure a bunch of the neighborhood would, versus kids having to travel a mile or so to get to a park of any size. Or that's one comment. And then as far as traffic, we know there's going to be increased traffic out there, and all them apartments going up in Second Addition there, and the traffic trends to go all to the north, and we have trouble down on Villard and 10th Avenue East making a left there, so you won't see a whole lot of traffic going south and coming in on 18th. In fact, a lot of people cut through 9th right now to get away from that left-hand turn, which I'm sure a lot of guys are aware of. Come down 18th, and that includes construction, trucks, all kinds of people. We're going to have more traffic coming through there now because the curvature going through here, even though they have one street coming through, which is fine, get from one end to the other from 25th, it goes all the way up to 10th, but they're not going to finish that section up in 10th, so that could be 20 years. We don't know how long that's going to be to take any traffic to go north, to get back up to north side of town, shopping center, or wherever. And like I say, the park, switching back to the parks, we're bordered by the interstate, so we have, if we don't have some kind of park of any kind of size in the near future, we're kind of limited. And the east side over 25th is commercial, so that side's limited. Of course, you don't want a park sitting by commercial, so you wouldn't want it up in that corner or up at bordering the interstate. So I guess that's my only comment. So
Thank you, Mr. Krebs. This time, if there's anyone else who would like to make comment, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Pam Reckard, R-E-C-K-A-R-D. We live on 12th Avenue East, right at the end of the field on the north end, which will impact immediately on where this subdivision is going in. The gentleman who said they are going to grade all of the dirt on this subdivision at the same time, can you imagine the dirt that's going to fly off of this when our winds come up? Is there any provision that is made that a fence, some kind of a barrier can be put in there so the entire other area that is existing now is not covered up by dirt? They have had, pardon me, some trouble in other subdivisions where entire lawns, gardens, houses, yards are covered with dirt. And if some consideration could be made to this, it would be something that should be looked into. Just as a comment, I don't think that any of the houses and any of the people now have just one vehicle. You're dealing with multiple vehicles, you're dealing with larger vehicles, you're dealing with boats, you're dealing with motorhomes, goodness knows what. You're already eliminating one side of the street parking. Where are these people going to put these things? They're going to put them on the other side of the street, and as wide as some of those motorhomes are, you're going to eliminate the width of that street. Just a comment. That the subdivision is higher in elevation. I have no engineering degree, of course. I have no idea what this is going to do to the drainage on the streets that are further down the street. 2 years ago, we had floods in those streets. There were very, very few homes that the basement was not, and the sub pump was not going, and many basements were ruined. I don't know what the drainage system is that will go into this new subdivision, but how will it affect the houses that are further south? Everybody always has one special comment about where is the specials taxes that are going to go into this? Is it going to affect the already existing home area? Is this all going to be paid by the new contractors and the new homeowners and the new buildings? Also, there are existing trees, mature trees, shrubs, hedges that are along the perimeter of these fields. Are they going to be destroyed? That, of course, will be up to the contractor. They are on the city verge. They are not usually on the homeowner's land, but they're windbreaks. That's what they were planted for. They are mature trees, they are mature shrubs, they are mature hedges. So if anything can be grandfathered in to save these things, it is a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reckard. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment at this time? Please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make further comment? Public comment? I have one comment addressing the parks, if this goes forward. I too would like to see, I mean, I live close to Peppermint Park, and it's just a little squatch of property there. But it's probably the most widely used little park in the city. It's extremely functional. And you're next to a fairly busy street, but people park on the side streets, and they do quite well with that. That piece of property is extremely valuable and has really served a purpose for, there's people from all over the city that drive over there and use it, not just our local residents of our little community there. I would like to see, personally, I wish the park board would consider taking a chunk of property on this project for a park, if not now, in the future. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, obviously we haven't discussed this, but initially I would agree with you. I think, I'm not so sure it can't be a combination of maybe cash and land. Maybe we don't need a huge spot, but to me, there should be something unless we figure something else out. It's probably, this is I'm not opposed to the development. I think it's a wonderful development. It's just kind of frustrating to me, to developer we've done a lot of work with. They've been great to work with. But the fact of the matter is the process wasn't followed like it's supposed to. And I think it needs to. I think we need to discuss this. I think there might be some opposing, or opposition to whether we take land or money, but I think something has to go up in this area. There's really, yes, there's a couple parks, but they're very small. We need to make sure we have land if we need to put something up there.
Thank you, Mr. Kovacs. Any other comments? Okay, sir. Oh, Mr. Jackson.
I maybe need a little direction from Mr. Corton here, but I'm a little confused as to how we bring this forward right now. We've got some discomfort with the park. If we do end up delaying, it seems to me we should give the developer some kind of decision on street widths, even if we do delay, so he knows what he's up against there. So I don't know. I'm a little confused as to how we should proceed for sure here.
I would like to hear everybody's comments on that, how they'd be comfortable with proceeding, and maybe everybody's got a different idea. But the question I have is if, to satisfy the developer, if we can sort out the street widths and other issues, and make sure that the park board's wishes are respected, that can we do, Mr. Colling, can we do an approval with contingencies, and if at the next meeting those contingencies are not met, we can either do a continuance then or deny it, recommend.
Your code does allow you to make approvals of a preliminary plat with contingencies. Then if those contingencies are not met, it would not proceed to final plat at that time. So you do have that option.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tews.
I'd be in favor of that with Mr. Kovac's concerns with the park board. I tend to agree with what Ed made a good statement before with the street widths and how we've done it in the past. If it works and our emergency services personnel are comfortable with it, I'm in favor of leaving it at the 31 and with proper signage and proper parking. The coving is, we keep referring it to as cul-de-sacs. It's not cul-de-sacs, it's coving. The developer's given up a lot of land for that coving. It's a whole different concept. The whole different curviness of the street is a whole different concept, which is new to the city as well. So I think this is the best plat that I've seen on this board in the time that I've been. So I think it deserves some consideration with some contingencies to move forward.
Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Krieg?
You know, I agree it's a good plat and everything. I'm concerned on 10th because I believe that's going to essentially from that northwest corner drop down and drive right through the heart. All that traffic's going to be a through street right through the heart of what they're talking here. And in that regard, I guess I'm not willing to lax on the 40-foot street. As far as the coves and cul-de-sacs, whatever we want to call them, maybe there's some consent there, but I have to sit back and think that's probably where you need more street width than anything for utility vehicles and you know, fire trucks and things. So I'm not quite sure where I'm at there, but for sure the main artery, I guess I'm not willing to lax on that. I think we need to keep that for sure at 40, the main thoroughfares through there.
Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
you know, one thing I'd point out that they are showing a 24-foot width in the cul-de-sacs. So, you know, you take away 8 feet for parking, you've got 16 feet of width going around the cul-de-sacs. I think that's pretty adequate. I'm comfortable with the cul-de-sacs. You know, I do think we have to give them direction. And, you know, as to the street width thing, I don't expect this to make the developer real happy, but I think there is a compromise, and that is that we require 40 feet on 18th Avenue and on that east-west street. I think they refer to it as Street 1 and 2, which goes the entire east-west length of the subdivision. That's over a quarter-mile street, and again, I just am very concerned. I think that's what Mr. Krieg is alluding to, that 10th Street is not going to be built, at least not for a long, long time. And that will put that traffic on those streets 1 and 2, that east-west thoroughfare. Let's build the others at 31 feet and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. At this time, Mr. Jackson asked Mr. Curtin for some comments, and we'll hear from
with respect to Commissioner Kovach's comments, I would think that, you know, looking at the plat itself, that the out parcel that they're not including would be the area, if the Parks District was going to take, that would be a perfect location for that. You would have a trail system around it. You would have the area that's designated as Phase 2 R3. That would be a perfect park location with the amenities in and around the creek area. That is excluded from the plat, so they would need to come back for a replat on that issue there. So if you feel comfortable, or if you want to move forward with a recommendation and say that the Phase 2 or the out parcel or the out tract would be, has to be decided from the Parks District if that would be a park dedication or fee in lieu, you can move forward with that. I would think that would be the normal location that you would take in consideration. If you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine. You know, however you want to move forward with your recommendation. The modification of the streets, that's a way to address some of the concerns that have been brought up, you know, from the commission members. You could have that as a motion that those 2 streets that were named by Commissioner Jackson would have to meet our standards of being 40-foot wide hard surface in order to accommodate it, and the developer would have to address that. Now, we could put that on the preliminary plat. The PUD is a subsequent application to this, and that will clarify that issue as well as part of the PUD. The plat's just going to dedicate the right-of-way width, but we could put in there as a note on the plat that those 2 streets have to be 40-foot wide hard surface construction for the city code, and that would clarify that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. Mr. Kovach.
Mr. Chairman, Ed, if I understand you right, you're thinking, and obviously we've made no decision here, but you're thinking what they already show as a park is what you would think we would likely take. Is that what I'm getting from you? Because, I mean, they already show, you know, several areas here, as I understand it, as park land. Of course, it's next to a swamp.
Well, to answer your question, I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's a wetland area. You do have sufficient area to the north where this area is included in the northwest side that they're looking at future development. That could be part of a park site as well for the amenities of that. You know, depending on how you want to do your park design. I mean, you could have a bike path, walking trail around the whole perimeter of the wetlands area, and that's exactly what they're proposing on that next phase. If you look in my conditions under the PUD, that they'll need to have additional trails and connectivity so that the vast majority of development will have a pedestrian trail that is readily accessed by all the property owners. So that makes sense to do it that way. That being said, that may not be an option for you. You may decide that you want to have the area that's designated to the west of it, that is south of 10th Street and where the multifamily is at, and you want that area to be dedicated. You know, obviously there would have to be discussions with the applicant. If it's the area that includes that, then I think that would be discussions, and it would be, I would imagine, a point of contention with the developer, and so you could just make a recommendation that would be your decision, and ultimately the Planning Commission would make a decision on the two alternatives. And that's, you know, we haven't went to that process yet in which, you know, the Parks District said we wanted this portion of the land, developer said no, we didn't want it. Ultimately, it comes back to the Planning Commission to remedy that situation. So, but however you want to do that, Mr. Kovach.
Does that open the door for you?
Yeah.
Is that a good PC answer for you?
You know, I really don't know what to say, just for the fact that, you know, we haven't discussed this at all. Anything. So I don't know really what to tell you. I hate to speak for the entire board as to what we might want to do. I really don't know. I don't know if that helps anybody, but
well,
maybe somebody else has some other guidance, but, you know.
Well, the last thing that I could suggest would be that we could just make a motion that, the site plan, and this would be under the PUD portion, and if you decided to recommend approval, that the PUD would be approved contingent upon final decision of the Parks Board, and to be consistent with the current layout. And if the layout differs, then they have to come back and do an amendment to it. And that would be a remedy to it. So they would move forward, and if the Parks District decided that they wanted land different from what they're showing, they would have to come back and amend the plat, amend the PUD, the preliminary approval of that.
Mr. Chairman, quick clarification, if you don't mind. The area that we're showing along the wetland area, that's not entirely all wetland. In fact, on the sheets we show the wetland boundary and then the boundary that we're providing as that outlot. So there's additional area outside that wetland area that could be, that is usable space within that. I just wanted to clarify that for the commission.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments or questions at this time?
I could respond to some of the public comments if you like. Otherwise, we probably have some general comments. You've probably heard them, and I'd just restate them. But in the essence of time,
That would be fine. You can respond to those comments, and they can be real precise.
I'll be as precise as I can. There's a couple comments, a comment regarding erosion control, and maybe it's more related to dust control, I think, is what the comment was. We've submitted a SWIP, or Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, within the plan. That meets, that will meet as we go through the final design. They'll meet the NPDES permit, or the National Pollution Discharge permit standards, and we'll take out a permit for that activity for erosion control and dust control. So while I can't promise that there will be no dust leaving the site, that we're going to meet those, we'll be held to those standards. Also, I know parking's come up quite a bit. You know, we are proposing 2 to 3 stall parking garage. The garages are 2 to 3 stalls. So where is everyone going to park? People have more than one car. 2 to 3 stalls is our plan. In addition, I don't think people recognize how long these driveways are, that these driveways are a lot longer than the neighboring communities. And so that allows for additional parking, which is another reason why we want narrower streets, so we can get longer driveways to have the cars park in the driveways instead of park in the streets. That's the whole goal. Hedges, existing trees along the property lines, I know if I lived there, I would be concerned with that as well. While I can't answer that question specifically, if those are on our property, we do need to do mass grading to make sure that the drainage works properly, that we're not bringing drainage onto their property. So if we need to grade it, we may have to remove those hedges just for grading purposes. And also there may be some small utilities back there. That may not be what they want to hear, but it's the truth that that's how that has to grade out. If we don't have to do that grading back there to meet our grading plan, then we have absolutely no problem leaving them in. I think I'm speaking for both of us on that. That'd be great. One further comment I have is, unless I absolutely missed it in the comprehensive plan, I didn't notice a park plan for this property or near this property, unless I read through it and I missed that. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why we're pretty surprised to hear that there's a need for a park area, a dedicated park area. So we apologize if we didn't vet that out fully to the commission. That's not our intent. Our intent is to vet those things out like the other things we have done. So we apologize for that, but I think we can work through that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, that's good to hear. Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, you know,
Mr. Jackson.
I'll be ready to make a motion here if you'd like, but just one last comment about parks. You know, we've got that 23-acre exception staring us in the face, and I don't know how we can tie that down at this time, but it's an obvious possibility for a future park. But I don't know how the park board can count on that or anything else.
I'm under the impression that this should not move forward without an agreement from the park district, and that in order to satisfy whatever their desire comes up with, that when they meet, if they want to take a chunk of the exception, I'm sure, I mean, it's up to negotiations between the park and the property owners. If they want to do that and they're willing to give it up, if that's, you know, what would satisfy them, they should be able to include that in their talks. A piece of property, whatever, if it comes to property and money, or property, if property is an issue and you would like a piece of that property, and you suggest that to the owner and they agree to it, it should be acceptable, shouldn't Mr. Coley? Or does it have to be a piece of the property we're looking at?
Well, Mr. President, the plat, as I understand it, does not include the 23-acre exception piece. That's not part of what you would be approving on this. My understanding is that's owned by a private landowner who is going to continue to use that as his farmstead, homestead, whatever he wants to use it for. So I think when you're looking at park space, I would not count on that 23-acre parcel as being developed or being available for park space in the future. It may, circumstances change over time and that may become available, but I don't think it's anything that the city or this commission should count on.
I mean, they could try, but I mean, the park board needs all the options they can, and so does the developer. So hopefully you'll have some meaningful discussions, and you got to come up with something that satisfies you. And the developer has to know that. The park board has to be satisfied. We went to great lengths of redoing that ordinance a couple of years ago and spent a lot of time on it to satisfy the park board's wishes and the shortcomings that they had been given for years. So that's a real concern. Any other comments or questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I have one, and it's a concern. How do we move forward with a preliminary plat that failed to really go down that checklist and address the park board? I think what they're moving forward with is I like it, but they missed a step. And these guys know what the steps are. They've been down this road before. That's where I'm having my issue right now. How do we move forward with this?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'd agree with that. We're putting a lot on the park board that they're going to accept what they have here, and if they want a different piece of land that's platted as housing, that's going to change this whole plat. So at best, I see probably delaying till next month to make any kind of formal table it, or like I say, table it at best. But I think they know where we're at with the streets. I hope, as far as maybe that hasn't been clear, but we could talk that some more. But it just seems like we're putting a lot on the park board at this time. I mean, Scott's answered a lot of the questions here, and he's trying to speak for the group, and he doesn't want to do that, obviously.
Right.
So
It does put him in a hard position, but our position is very clear that, I mean, the work we did with the park district on getting that ordinance clarified and redone, that the park district has to be satisfied before things move forward. Not afterwards and have them begging for something or getting a handout that they didn't want. That has to be satisfied, no question.
And Mr. Chairman, I mean, another reason for possibly tabling is we heard that if we do go to 40-foot wide streets, that's going to drastically reduce some of the lots and things. So this whole plat could change immensely by the time we get done, from what we're hearing. So I don't know if there's additional comments that we could receive on that end or not.
Well, yeah, I'll be glad to hear from.
I guess on the park board issue, I think Scott can attest, we've worked with the park board deeply. We've already dedicated 26 acres on the west side of town for a middle school. We've already dedicated the biggest park in Dickinson in Sundance Village. We work well with the park board. There are several locations in this plat that are not in the floodplain, that are not in the wetlands, that we could dedicate and work with the park board to come up with that, if that's the case. As he said, part of the problem is with this whole park issue is it was never identified, like I said, and he said in the comp plan that this was a spot that had been identified for a park. It does have one just on the northern border. As you had talked about, the small park you have in your area, the amount of acreage doesn't matter so much as what you do with it. And I think if some funds were allocated to upgrade that park, through cash in lieu or other options, that would work. Or if it's upgrading that park to a small park and having a small park into some of the areas that we could do that with. With the way the new regulations work, with the amount of time that goes between meetings, the amount of time, if this is passed today, it doesn't come back for final for 2 months. Quite obviously, that gives us plenty of time to get this worked out. As I said, we're already on the agenda for Friday with the park board. Going to try to meet with Scott and Mark and James in the morning to try to get that hammered out before then. So putting a contingency on it, to me, doesn't saying that gets passed pending that approval shouldn't be, I guess, that big of a. We have plenty of time to get that, and plenty of mechanisms to take care of it if it's not taken care of to the satisfaction of the park board, to this board, and to ourselves. So I guess I apologize for not getting that done on the prior meeting. I probably misunderstood exactly where we were at with that with James, obviously. So that's my fault, but I do believe that we can get that easily clarified in the next couple of days.
Thank you. Mr. Colling, legally, do you think all those contingencies could be put into a motion that would have some teeth in it, that would, if they're not met, that nothing can go?
Yes, I do. I think you can approve this contingent upon, from your discussion, satisfactory resolution of park dedication, 40-foot streets on, is it 18th Avenue East, and the main east-west road through the subdivision. And the remainder of the conditions, I believe, we can take care of, or the other, not conditions, but the other development contingencies, we can take care of through the development agreement as we negotiate that out with the developer. You know, it's your decision whether or not you want to proceed with this plat at this time. Legally, I don't believe there would be any impediment to doing this with the contingencies that were referenced.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Any other comments at this time?
Well, the only, Mr. Chairman, the only comment I would have is, you know, I guess if we can do that, I just want to make sure there's language in there that makes sure that we get this figured out before it goes any further. You know, I don't want to be limited to what we see here. I want to make sure that we can make a decision and make an agreement with them to figure out, and it might not be that difficult, but I don't know that.
I believe, Mr. Colling, that when you said that legally we could do it, and I think honorable people could do the legal thing. I believe that. Any other comments at this time?
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, at this time, we'll ask for a motion.
I would move that, you know, I'm looking for the exact written motion in here. I don't think I'm finding it, but I would move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat of the Creekside addition with the 10 conditions that staff has enumerated in our handout, and with 2 additional conditions. One would be that the park requirements are fully satisfied between now and final plat consideration, and 2, that we allow 31-foot wide streets with the exception of 18th Avenue East and the east-west street that I believe the developer refers to as streets 1 and 2.
I'll second Mr. Jackson's motion.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Kovash, what timeline are you under? When do you guys, would you take this to the park? When would they get it? Park District?
I think our next meeting would be next Friday, if I remember, or if I'm correct. It's a roundtable meeting. I had suggested to him that he needs to meet with myself, James, and possibly Mike before that, so that, you know, we can be a little bit more prepared to go to the rest of the board with it, because otherwise, I know we're going to be under pressure to make a decision at that meeting, and it's a big decision to make. And I don't think we want to be under that pressure to make a decision right then and there without knowing exactly what we want to do going into the meeting. So I think next, not this Friday, but next Friday would be the meeting, whatever date that is.
Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay, Mr. Krieg. And Mr. Elkin. Motion carried. Oh, okay, Mr. Elkin. Thank you for your
Mr. President?
Good morning. Yes, Mr. Coley.
In the case of divided vote, I would just recommend that you make sure in your minutes to record the ayes and nays for this motion, indicating that Mr. Krieg and Mr. Elkin voted nay on the motion.
Right. Mr. Krieg, Mr. Elkin, nay. Mr. Jackson, aye. Mr. Grimm, aye. Chair, aye. Mr. Hanson, aye. Mr. Tooze, aye. Mr. Kovash, aye. Next item on the agenda is item 7, a planned unit development, to consider a planned unit development for Creekside. Item 6. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting that.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've kind of talked about all the issues with respect to it during the last one. What you can do is see if there's any additional public comments, and then you can move forward with a motion if you prefer, or you could deliberate it, if you like, but I think we kind of blended the two together on this.
Okay, anybody would like to make comment on this? Please
Mr.
feel
Chairman.
free.
Ed, wouldn't you recommend that we wait on the PUD till everything's met and continue the PUD?
You could do that. I mean, the PUD portion of that, I mean, if we delay the PUD, they could run concurrent and about hit at the same time. So, that, I don't have an objection to that. It kind of makes sense. We could clarify some issues, and they could be put in with respect to the DA. So that could probably make, Mr. Kovash and not feeling that, we could easily address those issues next month and have those in the PUD that overlays that to address any outstanding issues. So I don't see that that significantly delays this project at all, because they would need to come back. In essence, if you did it in March, the PUD approval, then it would go April for City Commission approval. So it wouldn't delay that. The final plat on that would be in May, going to City Commission. So no, that wouldn't delay it. That would make a lot of sense to do it that way. It's your call if you want to delay that, and then get the parks comments and then make a motion, final motion next month.
Everybody concur with that? Sound reasonable? But at this time, I would ask if anyone is here who would like to make comment on that PUD. I'll take some public comment now if there's anyone here that will have something on their mind. Please feel free to come forward. If not, I'd ask for a motion on that. Mr. Tu?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to continue the planned unit development for Creekside until next month's agenda.
I'll second.
There's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We will continue that next month. Item 8, we have an American Bank Center Renaissance Zone project. Mr. Josephson, would you like to present this?
Sure. Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson. We've been working with American Bank Center. They have requested a Renaissance Zone exemption for a project. It's a building located on 28 First Street West. Christian bookstore is on the first floor. There were some apartments on the second floor. They are proposing to renovate the second floor and turn that into office space and meeting rooms for them, for themselves. The City of Dickinson has a Renaissance Zone. It was approved a number of years back. It allows for commercial rehabilitation projects up to 50% of the true value of the property. The intention of the project is of the Renaissance Zone rehabilitation is to allow for updating buildings to bring them up to code, which is what they're proposing to do. I did go out to the site with the city assessor. We were hoping to have at least a draft new true value. Right now, I believe it's about $66,000. Have not been able to get that from Joe yet. It was just last week that we went out to the site. Looking over the Renaissance Zone, goals, objectives, and policies. This appears to be consistent not only with the intent of the Renaissance Zone project, but also with two parts of the goals, objectives, and policies. One is to gain at least 3 improved structures or new businesses in the Renaissance Zone a year. And then the other one is to be considered an eligible zone rehabilitation project. A commercial property owner must invest at least 50% of the full and true value of the property. I know I came before this and before you and wasn't sure how to handle this. It looks like you were, with my discussion with you, Mr. Chairman, that you're looking for a recommendation, and I would recommend that this go forward to City Commission for their consideration and approval.
Thank you for your recommendation. At this time, I'd ask if anyone had any questions for Mr. Josephson.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you. This time I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the
Jackson?
request.
Okay, the motion approved. There's a second by Mr. Kovash. Any further discussion?
If I could, one thing.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, last night before the City Commission meeting, we actually had a special City Commission meeting and heard a presentation about a downtown visioning process and saw some really nice ideas what could happen. Of course, it takes money, it takes a lot of things, but it would utilize the Renaissance Zone program that we have heavily, I'm sure, and I just only wish that more people would look at using this program. We put it in place for a reason. This is a relatively small project, but it will be significant for downtown and will be a great project. But there's a great tool here for people to use, and I would just hope that more people would use the program as it exists now.
Now, your wishes are concern a lot of people. We had asked questions about it before, about how did they get the word out. Was there any more talk on that, say, in the last meetings you've had about how do you promote it?
Not specifically about the Renaissance Zone. I think as this visioning process goes forward, it's probably going to generate a lot of awareness about the Renaissance Zone program and other programs that might be available for downtown. If the visioning process does nothing else, I hope it will do that. And I don't know, was that televised last night? Was that on, will that be on Channel 19?
Good question, Chairman Jackson. I believe it was. I believe it was televised. Irrespective, the vision plan, we'll talk about that. Also, Steve Josephson, that will be one of his duties now that hopefully we'll get the comprehensive plan adopted in March, early April, and then we can start focusing on the promotion, working on the downtown plan, and then afterwards work on the promotion of it, getting the word out, and we've already started that. I mean, I'll let Steve kind of talk about some of his contacts that he's generated, but we've already started that process, and we're looking at promoting our downtown, enhancing or getting out the information with respect to the Renaissance Zone and any other funding mechanisms that the city wants to bring forth as part of the vision plan.
You know, one thought, if I could, for the two of you, there were 6 or 8 slides last night that were searching for a word. They were hypotheticals as to what might happen downtown, a before and after kind of slides. I wonder if those could be posted on Channel 19, because they would generate a lot of interest, I think. I don't know if technologically we can do that, but it would sure generate discussion in the community, I know that.
Any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended approval. Mr. Josephson.
Okay, well.
Do you have a zoning text amendment?
Well,
or would you like to make further comments on the?
Both, okay. I'll make further comments on this. One of the things we have been working with the chamber, have talked to the chamber about, about trying to get downtown, a downtown association going. I think that Cooper Whitman has been working with people. We brought in some people from the staff from the Downtowners Bismarck group to speak to some of the downtown people about organizing. The comprehensive plan does address the Renaissance, promoting the Renaissance Zone program. So as Ed was saying, now that we're moving on from there and the plan is going to be adopted, we'll have some more time to put into promoting this and helping the city helping however we can with the downtown group to get going. Still going to be their responsibility to get up and going, but we're here to offer assistance to them. And then I didn't bring forward the text amendment today. As I started looking through our zoning code, and I've also looked at zoning codes from other places in the United States, and these were just some thoughts I wanted to run past you, with the idea of trying to bring something up for the next meeting. One of the things I want to look at is height and the size of signs. The way that the current code looks to be written is that the area, the total sign area and the heights of pole signs, ground signs, were based upon zoning district. And I think the intent was that certain districts, like say your general commercial district, was supposed to be on the outlying area of town, where maybe you needed more sign area or sign height so that people could see signs as they were approaching the community. And then as you got more towards the core, the height and sign areas got smaller. Well, if you look at our zoning map, there's a real mix of where the different commercial is. So you could have one zoning district where there's a 25-foot maximum right next to another one that has a 45-foot maximum. You know, so perhaps instead of looking at zoning district, it might be function of the property or what kind of roadway the property is located, upon. You know, if something was along like something that functioned more as a commercial street inside the city where the speed limit was less, you might have, there's not the urgency to have the larger sign or as much sign area in order to capture people's attention. So that's a thought. And then also possibly measuring changing how these signs are measured. Currently, they're measured from the base of the sign. We could look at measuring it from the crown of the road instead, and that might make it bring it down a little bit. Also looking at things like including architectural features of the building as part of the sign so that there's a match. There's a match there. And also looking to update terminology. There's been a lot that's been done in terms of electronic motion signs lately and LED lights. And it looks, I've seen some more up-to-date codes, and perhaps some of the terminology in our code needs to be updated. And possibly things like as we build commercial centers, making sure that the signs that list the different businesses in there are more attractive than, quite frankly, some of the ones that are out there right now. One of the images that somebody is going to get of their community is the appearance of buildings and signage. And it is a visual impact. We have to balance that, of course, with the freedom of speech issues, for advertising, for signs. But we'd like to bring something forward, hoping to get something forward, a draft for you next meeting, that will address some of these issues and try to bring this up to date and try some different concepts here.
Thank you very much.
And if you have any questions, I don't know what people's thoughts are on signs in this community. I know Commissioner Jackson and I talked a little bit about that as to what we find attractive and informational and helpful. But, if anybody has any thoughts at this time, or if you want to call me and share them with me, please do.
I'd recommend that you all make comments and get them to Mr. Josephson on signs. And I said, I think something goes hand in hand with this is lighting. We need to check to see if our lighting ordinance is intact, and that goes hand in hand with signs. So give them all your comments you can on that, because we could have a mayhem of signage out there.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the lighting ordinance, I noticed in the zoning code that it was repealed back in 2007, 2008, and I don't know if anybody was on the board at the time that can give me some background of why that was repealed. Did it have to just do with the dispute over some certain things and just repealed it and said we'd come back at a later date, and this never happened? But currently other than we have some rough areas in the code that you have to connect the dots that state that you need to keep your the light on your property, we don't have lighting standards, and that's something I would like to look at along with the list, if you've seen in my office, of about 30 zoning text amendments that I'm hoping to kind of go through this year after the comp plan's done. But I was wondering if anybody, it doesn't sound like anybody has any additional information with it. I don't know why it was repealed.
We cannot recall what, I would have to go through all my notes to see.
Plausible denial, isn't it? Yes, plausible denial.
There was a big humbug about the lighting, the Dan Porter's new deal.
But we restricted that one totally. It was just, yeah, it was, I can't recall, but
I think we
That should
could
be
come back.
readdressed.
I think we could come back and put that in there, and put some very, I think, very standard lighting requirements and height issues, so that we don't have, and you've noticed, and this is pretty typical, you have a lot of gas stations that may be next to a residential area. Gas stations love to be lit up like crazy, and they look like lighting pads, in the middle of the night. So, there's some sensitivity that we could have and reduce the amount of, illumination that are there that is not going to adversely impact anybody. So those are something we could look at.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Toots.
motion to adjourn.
There is a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll say.
Any discussion? All